It's time to go on the record with WRAL News.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Cullen Browder. North Carolinians love sports, and many of those fans love to bet on the game. Sports wagering, of course, is nothing new, but much of the tens of billions of dollars gambled is illegal. That's the case here in North Carolina, with exceptions at the Cherokee and Catawba casinos. Tonight, we're going to explore the prospects of widespread legalized sports betting, including mobile gambling, right here in our state. I'm joined by WRAL investigative sports reporter Brian Murphy, who's reported extensively on this topic. Also joining us tonight, State Representative Jason Saine of Lincoln County, senior budget writer and past co-sponsor of sports gambling legislation. Representative Pricey Harrison of Guilford County, who's raised some serious questions about opening the door to legalized betting. And Ches McDowell, a lobbyist for KTS Strategies, who represents sports teams in this debate. I want Representative Harrison's take in just a moment, but first, let's set the stage on just where this legislation stands. And I'm going to start with Representative Saine. Last session, this bill came very close to passing, but amendments stripped it down. It eventually fell by one vote in the House. Do you believe this session it's going to pass, and what do you think this bill is going to look like?
I do believe it'll pass. I think it'll look a lot like the bill from last year. We certainly have gotten some input, and we'll consider that as it goes through the process. Everything has to start over again, so we'll start fresh with a new bill, but it will, like I say, mirror what we saw last year. And we've had more time for members to learn more about sports betting. We've also had another year go by where we're losing money to other states, so that's something that's going to be certainly talked about. I think over the last 2 years, the issue kind of needed to marinate a bit. As most things that come to the legislature, they don't necessarily pass the first time. Last year, when we got to it, it was we were getting into summer, and we had some legislators on family trips and some missing out and didn't get a chance to vote on it. So we'll see what that looks like. We had two bills that would have brought sports betting to North Carolina. One passed by one vote and one failed by one vote. So to borrow a gambling term, I think we broke even, but I think that it's something that is not going to go away. I spoke with Virginia legislators just a couple of weeks ago, and they were kind of chiding me and saying that we're glad you didn't get it passed last year, but we know you're going to do that soon. So they know that they've got a lot of North Carolinians going over the border and voting and not voting, but playing and sports, participating in sports gambling in Virginia and other states too. We see that. So it's something that it's a revenue loss for us, and North Carolinians are playing anyway.
Let me bring in Brian Murphy now, who's reported on this. And just this week, you found out that since it failed, the negotiations have shifted. What's changed?
Yeah, the sports teams are looking at ways to make a little bit more money off this. And under the previous legislation that Representative Saine just talked about, there would have been 12 licenses that would have been available to operators. The sports teams would like to see most of those allocated to them, so then they could go negotiate with the operators as to the best way to put this into place.
And Ches McDowell represents some of those sports teams. Ches, talk about what Brian is referring to. Are these sports teams looking for a better deal right now?
I wouldn't necessarily call it a better deal for the sports teams. I'd call it a better deal for the state. What we're looking at is a proposal that would allow some of the licenses that the state allocates to go directly to some of our sports teams and our sports facilities. We're in the process of working with the operators and the original coalition that have been working on this bill since the beginning, of trying to figure out what that structure looks like. At the end of the day, we're planning on supporting this bill, getting it across the finish line, and bringing sports betting to North Carolina, no matter what that looks like.
And Ches, you've been working on this issue for nearly 3 years. This started in 2019 after the Supreme Court changed the law in 2018. Can you talk about that process, and do you feel like you're closer to getting this passed, or last year's failed vote makes you a little further away?
No, I think we're very close. I absolutely think we have the votes. I mean, like Representative Saine said, a lot of times these issues just need to marinate. We've had a lot of really productive conversations, a lot of folks that misunderstood the issues, or a lot of folks that didn't get the whole picture when you're trying to pass a bill with a short amount of time, while you're also dealing with major issues like medical cannabis and Medicaid expansion and all these other things, trying to get someone's attention to move this bill along. But I believe that we have the votes this time. I believe that folks know that we left a lot of money on the table that went to other states, and a lot of money that went to the illegal market. That as long as sports betting is illegal in North Carolina, the integrity of sports in North Carolina is in peril. As these teams consistently fight for better players and fight for better coaches, those teams are not getting access to the funds to build up those programs, to keep these programs in North Carolina. We're missing out on opportunities to try to recruit a Major League Baseball team, things like that. And I think a lot of folks know that we're missing out. And as long as this is illegal, it's a bad thing for North Carolina.
Representative Saine, just for those who are interested, if they do want to bet, talk about how this would work. What's it going to look like for the bettors, and who's going to regulate all this?
Well, and you know, part of it's going to be decided as we go through the legislative process. And as I indicated, that we've had some good conversations. We certainly have a starting point when we start with the bill from last year, as we start to get more input, and we've got new legislators too, so they'll want to have a say so in how that looks at the final product. But the main thing to remember is that, you know, people are going to venues now in North Carolina. The Cherokee have sports betting, so it's something. It'll look a lot like that. Just to be frank with you, but you know, when Ches mentioned some of the sports teams and their venues, you know, they'll have an opportunity to really maximize their facilities for one, and to have entertainment and to have sports betting really all year long. In some instances, it'll look a lot like what you see in other states that have gone before us. The benefit that we have of being a state that hasn't quite yet passed sports betting is we can look at what happened in other states, what's worked well, and what maybe didn't necessarily work well. So I think, you know, it's always you know, with legislation and any type of rulemaking, it'll be something that you know, happens along the way, and we'll certainly look at you know, different ideas from legislators. But you know, there are plenty of ideas when you get legislators in the room. Everyone wants to have a you know, really a part of it and have their say so on it, and that's really, we expect that. And whether you're for it or against it, when we talk about voting for it or opposing it, you know, really it's something that we need to take time and talk about it and do those things. When you look at last year, we'd let that sit there a long time so that people could voice their opinions. And then unfortunately it kind of did get down to the wire because we had a chairman of a committee that ended up with COVID and delayed the process a little bit. But we saw a vote. I think it was a healthy vote. You probably would have taken that vote 10 years ago, and if it had been a possibility, it wouldn't have passed. So I think things change and legislatures change. So we'll see what happens when we get there. So that regulatory process will also be something that we keep you know, an eye on, and look at other states and see what we'll do there.
Ches, talk about one thing the Representative Saine didn't address right there, the mobile aspect that's under consideration right now. How would that work?
Yeah, so basically you'd be able to get on your phone and place a bet on sports through one of 12 different licensed operators. It's an incredibly secure process. It's been done in other states. 36 states right now have legal sports betting, so we're not reinventing the wheel here. This is something that's been done. It's able to verify identities. It's able to verify folks' age and things like that. But most importantly, a lot of the protections in the bill help problem gaming. Right now, you can place a bet on your cell phone. You can place a bet on your computer. They're not legal bets. They're not through licensed operators. They're through offshore accounts and offshore actors, a lot of times bad actors. That's how you bet on sports now, and there's a lot of money being bet on sports in North Carolina. But the way this would work would allow people who felt that they have a problem to lock themselves out of their accounts, to cap the amount of money they can use, and a lot of different protections like that. So it'll be available to anybody as long as they're inside of North Carolina. And we think it's a great thing.
All right. We're going to take a quick break right now. When we come back, I want to bring in Representative Pricey Harrison, who has some serious questions and concerns about all this. So stay with us. You're watching On the Record. Welcome back to On the Record. We're talking about North Carolina's prospects of legalizing widespread sports gambling. And of course, that's going to be up to state lawmakers. One of those state lawmakers considering this is Representative Pricey Harrison of Guilford County. And Representative Harrison, walk me through some of your biggest concerns about this kind of legislation.
First of all, thanks for having me. And I've got a pretty long list if you got a lot of time. And I guess one thing that was interesting to me, the New York Times did an excellent investigative reporting series this fall that talked about these efforts in other states that have enacted online betting and the problems that they faced. And a lot of these states have had buyer's remorse because these bills are basically written by the gambling industry. And it's a predatory industry, and it's looking to raise money. It's not looking to raise money for our state, but it's looking to raise money for the industry. So my recollection is that some of these figures that have been tossed around about the revenues that will come to North Carolina are pretty minuscule. On the states that have enacted online betting, such as Kansas recently, $350 million in revenues produced $700,000 and tax revenues. $350 million spent on gambling produced $700,000 in tax revenues for the state. And a lot of these states that have enacted these have given tax exempt status to the promotions, the free betting, have ended up really eliminating this potential for a revenue source. So I think it's kind of maybe overselling it to talk about the potential for revenue raising, and it's a bad way to raise revenue. Gambling revenue is not sustainable. It's not good. It's predatory, and it shifts the burden. The issue about the ubiquitous advertising, I think it's going to be a real problem. And it's in other countries, in other states, they've seen that it has enticed underage gambling. I think that there's the potential for a sharp increase in gambling addiction. There was a 43% increase in cost to the hotline last year. Many think is related to the increase in sports gambling. That amount of money that's being put in the gambling addiction is insufficient. It's a fraction of what's needed. I feel like it's very much insufficient oversight and regulations. The places that have these are not enforcing them, and they put small fines on the companies. They're multi-billion-dollar companies. So I feel like there's areas that we could really strengthen this bill. I am not against sports gambling. I'm against the sports gambling bill that was before us last summer, but I'm not opposed to sports gambling. And so I feel like if we had a large stakeholder process that addressed many of the concerns and looked at some of the problems of others, and I was glad to hear Representative Saine talk about that, because these states who have run into problems are going back and trying to fix it. And I'd hope we get out in front of those problems. So that's just sort of the start of some of the issues I see wrong with the bill that was before us last summer.
Representative Harrison, one of your chief complaints was about college gambling. Obviously, college athletics is a huge business here in North Carolina. Can you address your problems with that? And then secondly, you talked about the problem of being on your phone. Obviously, we know about how that mobile phone is in your hand at all times. I know last year you were okay with maybe in-person gambling at some of the sports venues around the state.
So sure, yeah, and a lifetime college sports fan. Spent my youth going to the ACC tournament in Greensboro, so I love college sports. And I think the issue here is that the way the bill was written, I believe a percentage of the revenues were going to the colleges that were being bet on, and the opportunities for corruption are incredible. And some of the items you can bet on, whether somebody was injured or how many rebounds they get or how many assists. And then you sort of wonder if that gets to the player and the player throws the game. We have had point saving scandals in the past. It's been a while, but I worry about some of what's happened in other states where states have entered into, colleges have and universities have entered into commercial licensing agreements. And it just seems like that is something we should look at really closely. I was glad that Representative Autry's amendment passed that eliminated college betting. And as I have mentioned to you and others, I think that a way to start is to have on-site betting at the pro sports venues involving pro sports. I think that's a great way to start. You have to be there. You have to be a ticket holder. You have to pay in cash. That's another thing I didn't mention. The ability to charge on your credit card can result in devastating gambling debts. So I think that if we limited it to the venues, to pro sports teams, to cash, we wouldn't end up with a lot of the problems these other states are facing, which I saw that Georgia, it's something like $360 million in problem and social costs and gambling addiction. And I just would like for us to avoid that here in North Carolina.
Ches, let's bring you in so you can respond to some of her concerns. Does the bill in the past and one we're talking about now really have enough restrictions to handle some of the concerns she has?
Well, with all due respect to Representative Harrison, the bill has been through a very long stakeholder process with a lot of engagement. And really, when you point out failures in other states, this is what we see with any kind of legislation that's enacted in multiple states. But what we do is we learn from those mistakes, learn from those failures, and create a better bill. I want to clarify a couple of points Representative Harrison said. Number one, she mentioned the 43% increase in calls to the gambling hotline. And that's correct. And the reason for that is because now, instead of folks betting illegally, folks are betting with an opportunity to get help if they have a problem. These aren't new gamblers. These aren't new bettors. These aren't people that wake up one morning because sports betting's legal and decide they're going to bet on sports. It's similar to the argument for medical cannabis, or for legalizing marijuana. People don't wake up and decide they're going to start smoking marijuana. It's the same thing. These folks are people that have been betting, but now they have a resource, and that's why calls are increased. Every advertisement has the gambling hotline on it. People recognize they have a problem and they go get help. Another thing I'd like to point out is that, we talk about the integrity of sports and the ability to fix a game or something like that. Every single point shaving scandal, every single problem that has happened in this universe has been caught in a legal sports betting regime. Right now, people bet anonymously online. They bet with credit cards and whatever else, and we don't know who these people are. The leagues don't get to look at what bets are being placed. The teams can't see what bets are being placed. All of a sudden, if there's a large movement on one line in a legal regime, we know where that movement's coming from and gives calls to investigate. But right now, all that's happening completely in the dark. And there are a lot of restrictions. For example, you can't bet on somebody whether or not they're injured or not. That's been in the bill the whole time. But every scandal, people like to talk about 1983, the Wolfpack scandal that was brought up on the House floor, which was called an illegal sports regime.
Ches, we've talked a lot about money, and certainly in Virginia, they reduced the number of promotions and deductions that could be deducted from the taxes. And you saw the tax revenue rise from about $3 million a month to $7 million a month in Virginia. How much money are we talking to come to the state of North Carolina? And a reminder to viewers, the state has a $25 billion budget.
Well, I'm not a fiscal expert. You got the finance chairman on here if you want to ask him, but I'm not going to dare guess how much tax revenue. I will say if it's more than a couple bucks right now, that revenue is just not coming to North Carolina. It's going overseas. It's going into shady actors' pockets. So we might as well catch it for North Carolina. But the biggest thing that we don't talk about from a revenue standpoint is that the value that we increase our professional sports teams in North Carolina by having this as part of their structure. This increases the revenue opportunities for our teams, for our facilities. We're hosting Professional Golf Association tournaments. We're hosting NASCAR races, Charlotte Panthers, the Charlotte Hornets. We've got a lot of professional sports going on in North Carolina. As that gets more competitive across the country and teams get sold and teams get bought, teams look to move, we need to have our teams in North Carolina as strong as they possibly can be and as profitable as they can be. Because if we have an opportunity where we could risk losing a team, or an opportunity where we could risk or opportunity to bring a team like a professional baseball team, we need to be in competition with these other 36 states that allow this line of revenue for their professional teams.
Ches, thank you. Again, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about sort of the timing and the process if this is going to happen. Stay with us. Welcome back to On the Record. We're talking about the prospects of legalized sports betting here in North Carolina. I want to bring back Representative Saine. We were discussing the potential revenue. Give us a hard number on what kind of revenue we can expect, and also, if this happens, when would people actually be able to start betting?
Yeah, so a hard number, you can look at other states and kind of get a feel for what it might be. If we, depending on what the end product of the legislation looks like and when that comes, and that'll also determine at what date people can do that. So it's up to legislators to make that decision. We'll, as we draft the new bill, we would like to have it up and running within a set amount of time once the bill passes, hopefully within 6 months, but it might take a year to get all the processes into place. So we'll still be behind. But as far as the number, a hard number of revenue, we've seen states, as Representative Harrison mentioned, that have ended up with really millions and millions of dollars that can come through. But whatever that may be, whatever it is, we're losing it right now to other states. So it is something that does matter. There's to me, there's no insignificant amount that it would generate. It's certainly significant when it's something that we could at least utilize to put into our state budget. I've been the finance chair, so I know what it looks like to raise revenue. I'm now the appropriations chairman, and I know that in a $28 billion budget, what it takes for us to get to that point to be able to spend on the needs of North Carolinians. So I think having that help contribute to what we're doing as a state, I think is very important, and that the fact that we're not contributing to other states, we can kind of keep that money at home. So if it's a conservative estimate and it's a lower amount, again, still counts towards the final bill that taxpayers have to pay. So I think that's important. The discussion about problem gambling, this one of the things that's missed maybe sometimes in the discussion is the transparency that then comes with it. And oh, by the way, the state's in the gambling business because we do have a lottery. So there are things that are happening anyway. When I've sat in, when I watch a football game at a bar or restaurant on a Sunday or Saturday and see people placing bets on their phones, it's already happening in our state, but it is something that I think that we can capture some of that revenue.
Representative Harrison, running out of time here, but I just you led a spirited opposition to this, a bipartisan opposition to sports gambling. Do you get a sense that opposition will rise up again in the 2023 session and either improve the bill in ways you'd like to see it improved, or maybe postpone it again for another year or so?
Well, I'll be honest, we can't even match the resources that have been put into this effort to pass and enact online sports betting in our state. But certainly there's a lot of enthusiasm for making this a much better bill. I'm really worried that we're thinking that this is going to be a great way to rely on a revenue generator, because that's proving not to be the case in other states. And the percentage of the revenue that's proposed to be raised in North Carolina is meant to go to a promotional fund. And then we have this whole constitutional issue about a proposed tax rate that appears to be unconstitutional based on an amendment we passed a few years ago that limits the tax rate in our state. So there are issues related to the revenue, and there are issues about whether this is a good idea for our state. And I do believe that the addictive gambling is not being handled well in other states, and it's certainly a fraction of the revenue that's needed. So hopefully we can get together and come up with some improvements to the bill, because like I said, I'm not opposed to sports gambling.
So quickly, in 30 seconds, and I'll let you have the last word, Representative Harrison, what do you want out of the process, which is just starting from scratch, essentially? What do you want out of the process?
I think that it would be great if we could have some folks sitting in a room and talk about what makes sense for North Carolina and learn from other states' mistakes and just put together a bill that is not going to be predatory, that's not going to end up causing more problems in our state than exists now. And we might be losing a little bit of revenue to other states, and we're not going to stop the offshore gambling. That is something that increases in every single state that has enacted gambling. So So thank you.
Got to cut you off. Thanks for our guests. We really appreciate it. We'll be following this. If you have something to say about tonight's discussion, you can follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/WRAL. You can also email us your comments on the record at WRAL.com. Have a great weekend.